What if the way you see yourself isn't accurate? Not like in a motivational way, but just wrong. Alright, now, early on, it starts out. I'm shy, I'm not creative, I'm bad at school, I'm lazy, not a leader, etc., etc. Now, you may not have said those things to yourself exactly, but we've all had that feeling one time or another. Well, at least I have. An experience can become an identity. You know, the core idea is that you can change, but sometimes the label that you put on yourself can stick with you. Like you grow, but the mirror doesn't change. You're still who you think you are, right? And when that happens, you keep living as if nothing new is possible. And you end up in a cycle of of low self-esteem. You end up saying shit like I might not be who I think I am. Your environments also they can reinforce the old ways that you live in. Like social pressure, some friends, quote unquote, they expect consistency from you, and that may need you to keep up a certain facade or something that you don't even like to do. Maybe your family reminds you of like the old mistakes you used to do back then. That brings it back onto you. And people react differently when you act out of character. So you shrink back and you end up reverting back into your old ways, into your old self. It's easier to stay predictable than to deal with all the what ifs when you do surprise them and do something different. Failure lies to you. Like, one failure doesn't mean you are a failure. One failure means try again until you get it. One rejection doesn't define your worth and become all you amount to. The same way one bad chapter in a book doesn't define the entire book. One bad verse on a song doesn't make the entire song whack. But your brain loves patterns, and even the false ones, and it adapts to said patterns and starts believing in them. When you fail once, you say I'm bad at this, and then once you fail twice, it's just this isn't for me, and so on and so on, and it gets worse and worse. What if you're not motivated, quote unquote? It's just you're overstimulated. What if you're not disciplined, quotation marks? It's just you're untrained. What if you're not confident? It's just you're not familiar. It gets kind of, it gets real. If I'm wrong about myself, then I've been living below my potential on accident. That's not comfort, that's terrifying, because it means that comfort was indeed optional. Your stagnation was what you chose, and your identity was interchangeable. You don't need to know who you are, right? You don't need the final answer. You don't need a label. You don't need a title. None of that. You don't need certainty. All you need is the permission to experiment. Maybe your goal isn't to find yourself, it's to stop assuming that you already have found yourself. It's an open-ended question. It's an open-ended answer. There's no set in stone thing that you are supposed to be.